Hello and welcome to Chapter 6, Navigating Organizational Politics and Cultures. So we're going to look at culture and power, how to pull off a successful change, and introduce the concept of force field analysis and stakeholder analysis. So here we are in the book. We're now in this section with mobilization. We're going to look at power dynamics. We're going to look at force field analysis again, stakeholder analysis. So sources of power, right? So power can come from positional power, right? Your authority in the organization, sometimes referred to as formal power. That's how we refer to it. Sometimes we can get network power, which is your knowledge of the network and your position of information gathering and distributing of information all through the network. There's knowledge power. I mentioned information power below. Expert power in that others see you as an expert in a particular area and they ask you for your opinion or your update on the state of that situation or whatever it is they're asking about, and that gives you power to influence them. That's why it's known as expert power. And the good news is that's something you can develop by working at it, right? That's not charisma. That's not how tall you are, how shiny your teeth are, and how funny you are, right? That's something you can actually work at. So I always encourage the students that their expert power is something that just takes work, and they should work at that and become experts in multiple areas. So that adds to your overall power within the organization. And then your personality power is more like charisma and things like that, sometimes referred to as referent power, how people want to be not just like you but associated with you, right? Something about you makes people want to be associated with you. You're on winning teams. You seem to bring success. You've got the answer. Upper management likes you, or whatever it is, and people want to be associated with you. Much the same way that people will donate money to charity because a celebrity asked them to, a celebrity that they like, even though they know the person donating, they know the celebrity doesn't know them, they know the celebrity never will know them, but still they like to be associated with the celebrity, so they donate. So in their mind, they're associated with the celebrity. Kind of interesting sometimes the way people work or think. Interesting how when people use, managers use power tactics, right? Here's in the middle column is managers influence their superiors, or in the right column, managers influence their subordinates. So they both try out with reasoning, right? And then when you talk to your boss, you try to develop coalitions, get some teams built up, as opposed to just plain out being assertive, right? So, and then the next on the list is friendliness. And then we see bargaining, but developing coalition comes in with the manager. Interesting that being assertive is low on the list when you try to influence your manager, which that sounds like good advice, right? And then applying sanctions is down here on the when the managers influence subordinates. It's not really an option you have with your boss, more than likely. And when does change occur, right? Nice and simple. When the perceived benefits of change outweigh the perceived cost of the change. Now the key there is not the greater than sign. The key there is the word perceived, right? They have to perceive that that's what's going on. You have to manage those perceptions, right? And maybe even change those perceptions. And we can look at the things under the benefits, right? We can have dissatisfaction with the status quo. We can have just benefits of change. And that's also factored into is the probability of success. So if it's a lot of benefit but a low probability, right, I'll think of that in terms of my willingness to adopt this new change, whatever this might happen to be. It has to be an even bigger gain for the low probability. It's kind of like loans, right? If a loan is more risky, I'm going to have more interest on it. Same thing here. If the probability of success is low, I'm going to need more benefits before I'm willing to do it. It's just a little equation I run in my head. I might not even know I do it. So there's lots of reactions to change, and these are always interesting to watch. If you're going to, I've been in several organizations that have been through major changes, including bought by an outside corporation, right? It's interesting to see how people react. So if you're trying to make an organization change, don't equate support with friends and resistance with enemies. So those who resist might be your friends. They might just want to do it. And another common mistake is ambivalence, right? People, you don't get any reaction, so you think they're against you, right? When in fact, it's just no reaction. They might not even be aware of the change. So when people talk to you about this, you need to listen carefully so you can learn from them, and then you can realign your initiatives, your explanation of why they should do this. You need to understand how to convince them that the perceived benefits are greater than the perceived cost. And people want to know that these concerns have been understood. That's why Like at the college here, when we have a major change, we have sounding boards and panels come listen to people's questions, and over again. We give people a chance to get this stuff out before the change happens, and it seems to help. So the bottom line is resistance to change is normal, and there's often good reasons for it. And sometimes these resistances are not bad. They're actually good because they help you get your story straight. They force you to scrub the things you're doing to prove that they're all necessary and that they're the best way to do it. And sometimes you might find a better way to do it because of that. So don't think of resistors as negative. Think of them as keeping you honest and making your case stronger. So why do people change? Certainly, or why does the resistance to change? Certainly there's self-interest. I don't like it. Something might happen. I have to do extra work, or I might not get rewarded the same way, or whatever they perceive, right, is the situation. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding of this change, or just this lack of trust. Yeah, you want us to change. You say it's got to be this way, but how do we know that? And maybe they've been misled before. Right? And sometimes what you think is a good consequence, they might think is a bad consequence, and they just don't like change, right? It's just a lot of stress and work, and they just don't like it. Right? So I mentioned force field analysis, and this is basically this restraining forces and driving forces, right? There's always going to be inertia, confusion, level of effort. All these things are restraining forces that you have to overcome with the driving forces before you can push it up to the desired state. That's all that force field analysis. Basically, right, need for change overcomes resistance to change. When you analyze the stakeholders, right, you think about who they are and what they want. Do they support you? And if not, what prevents them supporting you, right? So you need to get to these stakeholders sort of organization and get them on your team as soon as you can. You can see the stakeholder potential for cooperation, potential for threat. Some people actually go through analysis of the different stakeholders and see if they're with you, against you, and so forth. I suppose probably in Congress where they're doing a big important vote, this is the kind of stuff they would go through. Who's with us, who's against us, and who's on the fence, right? So they know exactly who to go after and how to convince them. In all this networking that goes on when we talk about change and the stakeholders and all that, there's certainly this networks that reach throughout the organization. They're both inside and outside of each area of the organization. There's a lot of social restrictions going on here, right? And there's time factors into this for these connections all through the network. Right, and which takes us to this change process. We see this initial awareness, or probably as an announcement, a grand email, maybe a big meeting where you get everybody together, right? So there's hopefully that's followed by interest in change. If not, you got to go back to the initial stage. You have interest in this change, right? And then you'll see this some of the organizations wanting the change to happen and they get ready to take some action on it, right? And what we'll generally see is the innovators, the people making the change, right, are all about the change. They love change. They're all excited for it, right? The early adopters, ooh, something new. I got to jump on board, right? So you always have those people kind of one eye and ear open at all times for any change or anything new, and they love to jump on board, right? And then once those people jump on board, you'll see the early majority go, oh, I guess the alert people are moving in that direction, and what I do is I don't like watching, but I keep an eye on them, and then when they move, I move. It's kind of like Burger King building next to McDonald's. So the early adopters will start to go, and then followed by the early majority, right? And finally, the flood of people come in, the late majority, then finally the last fence sitters, the late adopters will jump on board, and you're always going to have those few non-adopters, and my advice is don't worry about them, right? They're not jumping on board. You're worried about the bulk of your people, right? Get those on board. And the early adopters, maybe they come later, maybe they don't. Quite frankly, there might not be a lot you can do about it. Right? And then we have very much different levels of commitment there. I'm opposed to change, and I'm just going to refuse or work against you. I'm going to let it happen, but I'm not going to help, or I'm going to help, or I'm just going to make it happen, right? And you'll see all four different levels of commitment. And generally, the more people see it in their self-interest, the more they're willing to jump on board and help. And if you can make things more responsible, more detailed responsibility for each people and all those, you're liable to get more exposure to individuals and more commitment from them. All right, so we've seen that there's different power structure in the organization, the way people get power. There's this whole ambivalence to change. People just have these natural reactions why they're against change. This force field analysis, we can make sure we're just building up more and more perceived force for the change in terms of the goodwill to the people, right? And then we got to look at our stakeholders and those people involved in the change and see who's with us, who's against us, and how strongly, and see what we can do to modify that. All right, so this concludes Chapter 6.